This is Thieves Cant Capers, unlocking the systems behind the stories.
Well, what do we have here? A new show.
That's right. Something new and exciting.
It is Thieves Cant Capers, in which we will take a closer, focused look at mechanics, concepts, systems, like this first series, which is all about the newly released Draw Steel from MCDM. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
You know us from Thieves Cant, a tabletop gaming podcast. So thanks for following along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, at Thieves Cant Cast. We're on YouTube at Thieves Cant Cast, and you can email thievescantcast@gmail.com. So Draw Steel, it is the current hotness, so to speak, right?
It is.
In a season in which there has been a lot of hotness. Shadow Dark is still huge.
Right.
We just got new core rule books for Dungeons and Dragons. We've got Daggerheart. We've got Tales of the Valiant. So there's no shortage of new big tabletop RPGs. But today, we kick off our journey through Draw Steel.
Yeah, the market's saturated, but this is a game that kind of stands out, partly because of the developers have a pretty big reputation, and it's a little different. Perhaps it has some different aims than some of those others, or some different methods.
A little background on Draw Steel, again, from MCDM, Matt Colville's group, raised over $4 million on backer kit to fund the game, the production of the game, and PDFs released just at the end of July. The hardback books for the Heroes book and the Monster books, those are expected to start shipping, I think, in September. So those are forthcoming. So we are doing our work off of the PDF. Just a heads up, today, we're going to take a look at the introduction and the chapter called The Basics. But I really think we should begin where all books begin, and that is the cover. You know, we're told never judge a book by its cover. And, you know, that's nice advice and all, but I always judge books by their covers.
And this has quite a cover. I think it conveys what the whole point is, and that is that this is going to be epic. It's going to be big.
Over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, this cover features a really colorful battle scene. You've got your heroes battling what look like kind of raging demons and devils. Again, all really over the top. Kind of looks like a comic book cover or a movie poster, which, again, Chris, I think is intentional, as you just said. It's trying to capture the spirit and the flavor of the game. It says right there at the top, tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy.
Yep. And that is the promise that they are going to try to deliver on. We're going to talk about that a little more, but that is their mission statement.
Anything else on that cover before we get to the contents here?
It shows a lot of different flavors also. I mean, as we've come to expect from games like this, but I mean, there is some high fantasy, but we also see like a duelist stabbing an imp, you know? So it looks like, you know, there's going to be a nice mix here. But regardless, it's clear that this is not going to be a low magic game by default. It's not going to be Game of Thrones, early seasons, if you want to look at it that way. This is going to be big, and it's going to be heroic. So it's a big melee happening here, and I want to get in the middle of it.
We crack open the pages, and again, this is Book 1, Heroes. The book leads with the question of, what is this game? And it answers by telling us up front, in no uncertain terms, this is a game about fighting monsters. You can have your 3 pillars, you can have your combat, your exploration, your role-playing, but this is a game about fighting monsters.
Yeah, those other elements are there, but they have a clear focus, which is a good thing.
Sure. And that is the broad answer, as you said. The truth is a little more granular than that, but they're trying to set expectations here.
Right.
Throughout the introduction, the writers continue to delineate Draw Steel as that specific type of gaming experience by telling us what it is not. I like the presentation here. I know this writing style is probably not for everybody, but I like the conversational tone, and I like that the game, again, it's very upfront. I love the shout outs to other games in this section. You know, it says, hey, you can do some wilderness exploration in this game, but it's not a survival game. It's not Forbidden Lands, right? Forbidden Lands is great, and that's what it's for. You can have some horror elements in this game. Maybe there are some terrifying things that happen, but it's not a horror game. We love Call of Cthulhu for that experience. So I love that it shouts out these other games and what they're known for, and that's how it, again, sets itself apart. This is what we are trying to be.
Yeah, it is good. And I think if you look at, of course, the introduction written there by James Introcaso, I hope I said his name right.
The foreword?
Yes. I appreciate what he talked about here because, again, it's that focus on what their intention was with him and Matt Colville sitting down and asking the question, what makes a hero? And they talk about the fact that power is not, I mean, that's part of it, right? A hero has to be capable, but a lot of people have power and they don't use it to help others, right? And so this, again, they're letting you know up front, this is the goal of the game, is to be a hero. And they use the example of Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, right? And I appreciate that. Of course, obviously the cliche, with great power comes great responsibility, right? But that's the idea, is you are going to be using the powers you have to be heroic. And so there's a big focus on that. And the other focus going forward you see is, and this is a slight perhaps to some systems, but the hero doesn't fight a tough battle and then take a short rest, right?
Right.
The hero keeps pushing.
Right.
They keep going forward. And so they have these ideas baked in the system that we're going to talk about later on with, victories and recoveries and respites and all these things. But essentially what they're saying is, you are going to push yourself. A hero pushes themselves against these impossible odds. And so that's their claim from the get-go, is that this is what makes a hero. And so now the question is, can they back it up?
How do they execute?
How exactly?
And does it work in the flow of the game? Later in the introduction, then, it shifts our focus to what draw steel is. It talks about what it's not, but now it wants to talk about what it is. And it harkens back to those 4 key words on the cover. Again, tactical, heroic, cinematic, fantasy. Chris, you just kind of summed up what their idea of a hero is. And I think it's captured in these elements as well. As for tactical, they define that word as teamwork matters. Positioning matters. The game encourages parties to think about and talk about how they're going to pull off their plans. Strategy is what we're going to do, but tactics, it's how we're going to do that. Players will have options, and there's going to be synergies or combos that they can achieve through coordinated moves. It's almost like the game, it sounds like it's going to encourage table talk.
That's exactly the impression that I got too. That would be table talk in a game like D&D, but instead this is, hey, we're working together. And the more we work together and synergize these abilities, the better we're going to perform. So it's a much more tactical mindset. It's understanding that's the focus of this game. Be heroic, be tactical, be smart, and kill monsters.
As for heroic, the default, again, as you were saying, Chris, the default assumes that the PCs are motivated to do the right thing. They are self-sacrificing. They are champions of good. Another aspect of heroic in draw steel terms means that the game is not concerned with the mundane. It doesn't care about your shopping. It doesn't care about tracking rations. It doesn't care about how many torches you have. All of that is assumed to kind of happen off screen. So it's only concerned with what is happening on the screen, what's interesting, which segues nicely to that cinematic keyword. Abilities and features will be strongly evocative. They give the example here in the introduction of the ability called In All This Confusion, which a character might be able to use to retreat safely out of combat. So not a mechanic that we've never seen before, but named in such a way that the naming convention inspires the action.
I appreciate this is the other side. Yeah, it's going to be tactical, but it's going to be cinematic. We all want that in our combat, right? We want to see it in our minds. We want that movie in our minds. I can picture these characters doing this, right? And so, yeah, they do cut out a lot of the things that bog down systems. Like they talk about Indiana Jones doesn't go to the local sporting goods store because he's run out of ammo, right? He just has.
We know somewhere he's getting his bullets, right?
Right.
And so he's taking the time to do that.
And it doesn't mean there's not a time and a place for things like that, right? I mean, I've run, in the campaign that we're running now, it's a survival type of scenario where food and water are important, but
they are scarce and they are important in that game.
Exactly, but it's not the focus here. It's tactical, cinematic combat, like where you can visualize this and really get into it. And this is a great backbone, I think, for a system, for an approach to how you're going to build it.
Yeah. Again, this is all philosophy.
It is. Yeah. We're not into the bones of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, that fourth keyword, fantasy. Essentially, we're talking classic fantasy stuff here, with the MCDM spin on it, right? You've got some classic tropes, maybe with an alternate presentation. So I really think the default of Draw Steel, I think, is a fantasy setting that could accommodate anything you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not mentioned until later in the introduction, but it's worth pointing out here that the game is designed for 10 levels of play, split into 4 echelons, 1st to 3rd, 4th to 6th, 7th to 9th, and then finally that capstone echelon at level 10. But even at first level, that first echelon, the default assumption is that the PCs are already known heroes. They've already saved the town before. Their name is out there for having done some good deed.
Right. It's again, just plays into that idea. You're a hero from the start.
From there, Draw Steel points out some of the more obvious differences between itself and maybe those classic D20 fantasy games that you're familiar with. For example, character options are going to be different. Draw Steel says don't assume that there's like a straight analog for everything here that's in your fantasy game. Like the conduit can't just be assumed to basically be a cleric.
Right. Yeah, which is good. It's new, it's fresh. So yeah, they recommend really reading through these things and having an understanding, and I'd say it's a good idea.
Yeah. Recognizable elements, are you going to see those? Yeah, but there's going to be some twists and turns along the way that you might not have seen coming. Bonuses and penalties to die rolls are smaller. We're dealing with a different dice mechanic here, specifically that core mechanic of the power roll, a 2d10 roll. So a +1 or a -1 to a 2d10 roll is going to be way more substantial than it would be on like a d20 roll.
Yeah, I want to talk for just a minute about the 2d10s. So this is interesting. So instead of d20, right?
Right.
2d10s are rolled. I did a little research on this because they briefly mentioned that they'd done the math, but as far as how it statistically affects things, how much? Like what does that look like?
Yeah. I
so I hit Reddit, the font of all information, but there was a good source. This was a post a guy had made 5 years ago. You Mad Guy 271, if he's still on Reddit, whatever. I want to give him credit, but he'd done this statistical analysis of the difference and what it really skewed towards, which makes sense, obviously, but it really increases the chance of mid-range rolls,
right,
versus those outliers.
It's a more predictable outcome.
Yes, because on a D20, everything has a 5% chance.
Sure.
It's flat. But whereas with 2D10s, like the chance of rolling a 20, it's like a 1% chance or a 2, right? So it's interesting how that plays out. He received a lot of criticism at the time because people were thinking about D&D. And so they were like big misses and big hits. Like people want that swing, right? They want that variety. And in that system, it works. But the way they've got this game set up with the different tiers of success that we're going to learn more about, it makes sense why you would want this. So I thought it was interesting just seeing that, how the 2D10 impacts versus 20s.
Yeah. I am relieved to not see the D20 in this game.
Mm-hmm.
There are times I can remember in the depths of our 4th edition D&D campaign years ago, telling you after a session, if I never roll a D20 again in my life, I may be fine with that. And of course, I have since rolled a D20 in my life, and I've also been fine in that regard. But it's just nice to see, a big name fantasy RPG go a different route.
Right. And we know there are a lot of games that do this.
Of course.
But it's just, it is refreshing. It's different. And I think it works with the system they've created.
Another difference that Drawsteel points out, the differences between itself and your classic D20 fantasy games. In combat, your attacks don't miss. This doesn't mean that you can't have a bad turn, right? You still can. Maybe you only deal the minimum amount of damage. But even then, you're always going to make a little progress on your turn. So that is a distinction.
Yeah.
We've mentioned before that need to rest in a lot of classic D20 games. In Drawsteel, they say, no, we want you to push on. You touched on that earlier, Chris. And finally, there are a lot of skills. The game wants players to have options in defining their heroes. So skills here are not tied to characteristics or attributes. They want you to find creative ways to use your skills. It gives the example of a character trying to hide in a crowd and using their presence skill, their force of personality. Well, that's an interesting take. That's an interesting way to think outside the box. How can I use my force of personality?
Yeah, it's the game's not squashing creativity just because it's tactical.
And finally, the introduction concludes with what I think should be a fixture in gaming resources, this big, beautiful glossary index. 6 pages of key terms and their definitions, along with the relevant page numbers. Your glossary and index right up front in the book. This is a must for me.
It's beautiful. Been asking this for a long time in a lot of different games. Just put it up front, and it's. I'm sure it doesn't cover everything, but it seems pretty robust. So yeah, I love it.
When we get Drawsteel to the table, I can see us referencing this all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A quick definition. Let me check that page number. This is going to be a go-to for a lot of players, I believe. And I would love to see this again in more products. Any other final thoughts on the introduction before we move on to the basics chapter?
Again, now we've heard the promises.
We've had our expectations set.
Right. We know what their goals were when creating the game. So now it's time to start looking at it and say, were they able to accomplish them?
So the basics kicks off with the obligatory example of play. Demonstrates the idea that RPGs are conversations, right? That give and take between the director, that's what they call the GM, and the players. We're then introduced to the 5 characteristics that represent a PC's capabilities. Those are might, agility, reason, intuition, and presence. What do you think of these 5 abilities?
I like them. It's very similar to other fantasy games.
Sure.
Absent from the list would be Constitution, I would say. I mean, might obviously is representative of physical strength. Agility is your coordination, your reflexes. Reason is basically intelligence. I mean, to put it bluntly, intuition,
smart,
more your wisdom, right? Your instincts,
your ability to read people and read a room,
right? Exactly. And then presence. That's how charismatic are you? How's your riz? Right?
So each of these scores is going to be rated somewhere between -5 and +5, 0 being the average score for the average human.
Mm-hmm.
As for dice, the game tells you need the aforementioned D10s plus the occasional D6 and sometimes D3s. That roll of 2d10 that we mentioned earlier, again, that's the core mechanic. They call it the power roll. And there are actually two types of power rolls.
Mm-hmm.
There are ability rolls for when you're using a class ability to attack or otherwise affect an enemy somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything else outside of using abilities is called a test. But it's always a power roll. It's always 2d10. And you add one of your characteristics to that roll.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you're gonna add that modifier. That's going to be determined by the kind of roll you're making, an ability or a test. Now, the outcome can be one of three results.
Right.
You've got your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 results.
So at tier 1, that would be an 11 or lower.
And that's the total. That's the sum of the dice plus the modifier.
That's your worst outcome. It's minimal. If you hit an enemy, it's going to be minimal impact. If you are trying to climb a wall, you were going to fail probably, right? So you're going to fall.
So if it's a test roll, you can still fail as a tier 1.
Yes.
In combat, an ability roll, you're still going to succeed, but just only a little bit.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Okay, now tier 2, this would be 12 to 16. Again, that's the roll and all the modifiers. This is average.
Yeah, you were talking about that predictable outcome with the 2d10 roll.
Mm-hmm.
Usually those middle results are going to come up more than anything else. So this is the average.
This is probably what you're going to see. And so just as you would imagine, it's going to equal a moderate impact. And so when you hit an ability, it's going to be a decent amount of damage. If you're trying to accomplish something, again, like the example of climbing a wall, you might still fail. If you succeed, it might have a cost. They allude to that here.
Right.
So
like success with a penalty.
Right.
For the ability roll in combat, they say, that more moderate impact and maybe even a temporary effect that hinders enemies, something ongoing for a round or so.
Mm-hmm.
Get
Right.
added on too.
And then with tier 3, this is a 17 or higher.
Yeah, this is what everybody is going to feel good about.
Right. This is the best outcome that you could hope for. So if you're attacking an enemy, it's going to hurt. You are going to do some damage. It's going to have, again, this is your maximum impact. Okay. So if you were trying to accomplish a goal, again, you're trying to climb the wall, you're climbing the wall. This is representative of, a thorough success. You're also possibly going to get something a little bit extra with this success. There's going to be some effects or some riders.
I like degrees of success.
One note they have here that's kind of interesting is you can always downgrade a power roll. So if there's a particular effect that, say, a tier 2 has, opposed to that tier 3 success, you could downgrade it. And so the example they give is, you might get a tier 3 outcome that lets you put the restrain condition on a creature.
Sure.
But you want the tier 2 outcome because it gives you, it imposed the slowed condition.
And in this moment, that's what you need more than anything.
Right. And so you always have that option. Obviously, you can't upgrade at will, or we would every time, right? But you can always downgrade a power roll.
So you might be wondering, what about critical hits? And yes, Draw Steel does feature critical hits.
Mm-hmm.
So a natural 19 or 20, a natural roll of 19 or 20, and they mean before the characteristic is added or any other modifiers are applied, whatever that roll is. If it naturally comes up 19 or 20, that's a crit. Now, what that looks like in play is going to vary based on your class. So there's more to come on crits in the future.
Just understand that even if you downgrade that power roll, you do not lose the extra action benefit of a critical hit.
Okay.
So there is some motivation there. If you get the crit, obviously that's big. You don't want to toss it away. Right. You still get that extra action.
So I can take if I crit, that means obviously it's going to be a tier 3 success.
Mm-hmm.
So I can keep whatever benefit I get for that crit, but then take the tier 2 rider.
It sounds like it.
Okay.
At this point, it sounds like it. I don't know all the details about crits, but that's the impression I get.
Well, let's talk modifiers. We know that the characteristic is added to the power roll, but sometimes some other numbers get thrown in as well. this is where the first little red flag goes up for me,
Mm-hmm.
because we're about to get into a lot of terminology.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of little fiddly bits,
Some mathing.
and they all have names, right?
Yes.
So, again, I want to point back to that glossary index.
Yes.
So helpfully provided at the beginning of this book. You're going to need it.
Yes. And this is the point where it's like, I feel like it is hard to read these things without having played and understand the impact.
We're taking this all in out of context.
Right. It may be that I pick this up and after 2 sessions, it's so intuitive, but it may also be that this is something you struggle with for a long time.
Right. I mean, this is one of the challenges to getting a new game to the table, right?
Right.
Is taking all of these new concepts in, even though some of the concepts aren't necessarily new. They're labeled in different ways. So it's learning the vocabulary.
Yep.
First up, we're talking edges and banes. I think, honestly, this is a pretty clean system.
Yeah.
I don't know your thoughts on this, Chris. We can get those in a bit, but let me explain how they work.
Sure.
So edges are situational advantages. Banes are situational disadvantages. And they grant either a plus or -2, respectively, to the power roll.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Edges and banes cancel each other out, 1 for 1, right? If you've got 1 edge and 1 bane, 1 situational advantage, 1 situational disadvantage, then you're just going to roll it straight up without applying anything extra,
Mm-hmm.
right? But rolling 2 or more edges or banes does not add an additional plus or -2. In fact, in cases like this, which are called double edges or double banes, rather than add any modifier, the result of the power roll is simply stepped up or down, depending on whether you're dealing with edges or banes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got 1 edge, say, I'm climbing and I've got some gloves. That gives me an edge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then I get to add +2. If I'm climbing with gloves and there are natural foot and handholds on the surface that I'm scaling,
right,
that would be another edge, so a double edge. So rather than add a +2, I just get to step up my result. So I'm guaranteed at least a tier 2 success here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So again, I think that's a pretty clean system. What do you think?
It is. I mean, obviously, the clear parallel is advantage and disadvantage.
Right. From 5e.
Which is a lot easier, a little cleaner, I think, because we have that added element of the double edge or the double bane.
Right.
And so it does complicate it a little. I don't think it's that bad, and they capped it at 2.
Right.
So
that's a good point to make. You can have as many banes or edges as you want, but that the outcome of the double is it.
right.
That doesn't scale.
And I think the idea, I mean, most people look at this, you know, you don't have hard, fast rules all the time to apply advantage or disadvantage. You read the situation. Okay, the characters have a rope. They have climbing gear. It's going to be easier. I'm going to give them advantage on this attempt, right? Same idea. It's just a little more dialed in where it recognizes, hey, you have a lot of advantages to this, you know, or you have a lot of advantages. There's also some disadvantages. Maybe, yeah, you have these gloves that are sticky and are going to help you climb. You have a rope that's going to help you, but it's also raining. Okay. And, you know, it's also, you know, whatever the condition may be. So it's weighing those things out, but because it's capped at 2, it doesn't get too out of hand, because you can see how you would have to start writing these things down on a piece of paper and doing math if it went any further.
Right. But at this point, I'm trying to read this kind of through a GM lens,
Right.
how I would handle these situations. At this point, the game has not given me anything that is totally frightened me away.
Right.
Right. I
Right.
feel like I can grok all this.
Right.
Right. But here we go. In addition to banes and edges, the book states that there are other rules that might impose additional bonuses and penalties with no limit on their number. Okay. Now, the book explicitly says in this section that you should not be afraid of this. All right. It says, hey, don't. It's almost like it read my mind.
Uh-huh.
And it says, don't worry. Those rules will make sense when they come up.
They say those bonuses and penalties are rare. easily applied? We'll find out.
We'll find out, right? All right, next, the book describes a resource for the players called hero tokens. They've got access to a pool of these. It's equal to the number of heroes in the party. It kind of recharges at the start or replenishes at the start of every session. Players can earn more of these through play, do something daring, something inspirational. Maybe the GM adds a hero token to the pool for you. You can spend those tokens to increase the damage or the potency of an ability, to succeed on a failed saving throw, to re-roll a test, or even regain stamina, which is draw skill's version of your health points. The book does suggest an optional rule that tokens don't refresh at the start of a session or disappear at the end of one. That pool is just tracked from session to session. This is a fairly standard mechanic in role-playing games these days, that small resource that players can spend. We've seen it in Savage Worlds for years with bennies. We've seen it in D&D. Some DMs use it, some do not, with inspiration.
Yeah, same idea, I think.
Moving on, one of Drawsteel's promises is that it cuts down on rest time. So to achieve this, the game awards victories and that's with a capital V, another keyword, for every non-trivial challenge a character overcomes. So it can't be like a simple, quick, easy fight. Right? We're talking like a robust encounter.
Right. Yeah, not the bag of rats.
Correct. I love their little sidebar on the bag of rats.
Yeah.
It ain't heroic to
Right.
kill a bag of rats.
Yeah, it's mean. Yeah.
As your number of victories increase, so does your power. You're going to be able to do more, use that victory total to fuel your exploits. That means that parties are going to have to make a choice to push on, to build that up, maybe enter that climactic final battle with their abilities just on absolute nuclear fire.
Yeah.
Right? Or to rest, which Drawsteel calls taking a respite. And when you do that, you lose all of your accumulated victories, meaning you lose that power that you built up as well. Those victories then convert to XP.
I love it. Yeah. I love this idea. I mean, you think about it, you're fighting through the dungeon, and you're about to enter the Lich's chambers, and it is going to be bad, and you need to be at your best. And in some other gaming systems, somebody's like, I'm casting Liam's tiny hut. We're taking an 8-hour nap, right?
Yes.
And that is not how, I mean, can you imagine in the Lord of the Rings if they're like, here comes the Baelor. We better all get our knapsacks.
Everybody nap real quick.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah. Not cinematic. Doesn't feel heroic. I think MCDM, in choosing those 4 key words, putting it on the cover of their book, I think they used that throughout the entire design process as almost a determining factor, a decision maker for it. Does this element that we're playtesting, does it feel cinematic? Does it feel tactical? Right. If not, it may be cool, but it's not for our game. Right. So they are looking for things that achieve those four key words, and this is a huge step in that direction. I'm with you, Chris. I love this.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, they used the example of Spider-Man earlier, right? At the end of a Spider-Man movie, he looks terrible, right? He's been beaten, he's bloody, his costume's ripped, but he doesn't stop. He keeps going, right? And same idea here, obviously it's a fantasy setting, but it's the same idea. Like, you are pushing yourself, and in doing so, you are able to achieve the most. Like, this is fun. And this is why I think there's such an emphasis on heroism.
Right. You want to be a hero? Then keep doing heroic things. Keep pushing, and you become a bigger, badder hero.
Yeah, and it's going to mean taking a chance. It's going to mean being uncomfortable, because your stamina might be pretty low when you walk into that Lich's chambers, but you're coming to bear. You've got all your tools at your disposal, and he is going to have a fight on his hands. I love it. I love this idea.
So what if you do decide to take that respite, sacrifice those victory points?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in the game sense? Well, a respite is a full 24 hours spent sleeping, eating, dressing your wounds. You are allowed one respite activity. I think they've got a mechanic in here called a downtime project that you could work on. You could swap out your kit. You know, what are you going to carry out into battle next time? So you can do some light things like that. Right. But in order to achieve the respite, it's got to be a full 24 hours. A simple 8-hour rest does not earn you back any of your resources. The respite recovers your recoveries, which I think is their version of like a 4th edition D&D healing surge. So you'll get your recoveries back, your stamina, and then those victories convert to XP and then reset to 0.
And there's going to be times when the respite is the way to go, obviously. Maybe pushing to that next combat is not the wise choice.
Sure.
So it is. It's a decision the players have to make. It's another tactical decision.
Other odds and ends mentioned here in the waning pages of the basics include those heroic resources determined by your class, spent to activate powerful abilities, and your recoveries, again, reminiscent of those 4E healing surges. And then the remaining handful of pages in the chapter serve as a primer into Drawsteel's default setting of the world of Orden and the greater timescape to which it belongs. We're not going to go in depth into that material here, but we're certainly going to touch on different elements when it's appropriate to in upcoming episodes of this series, such as next time when we take a look at the making a character section as well as the ancestries. Those are going to be tied strongly to that default lore and the default setting here of Orden.
Yeah, I hope you all will go on this adventure with us as we continue to dig into this system. Obviously, encourage everyone, if you got the PDF or not the books yet, that's going to be a few months.
Very soon.
But yeah, I mean, let's dig into this together because it's fascinating. And I really want to see if they can deliver on the promises made. There are some really good ideas here.
First impressions based solely on the introduction and the basics.
I want more. I want to play this. I want to see how it works out because it does seem rather daunting because you don't have that short rest, long rest mechanic to back you up. I mean, that's sort of whatever happens, we can recover those resources and you lose them, but you're gaining in power. And that's where you want to be, right? That sounds fun.
Yeah.
So
I was excited about this game in the first place. As soon as I heard it was being made, I was excited. As soon as I heard whispers that it was going to be tactical, very much like 4th edition D&D, I got very excited. And I do like what I've seen to this point. I think the art is top-notch.
No,
I think the production values are top-notch. I think the promises the game makes, I'm all about. I am a little concerned with the number of terms that a table may have to be expected to remember, the number of little fiddly bits to keep up with. And I'm a board gamer. I love board games. I'm used to fiddly bits. This feels like it's going to have a lot. That's just first impression.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. And I mean, I guess part of that is just the tactical nature of the game with that focus. Again, this isn't really a game you're going to be playing in the theater of the mind. It requires a grid, and you're going to need to consider positioning and, again, the strategy, the synergies between classes, the edges, the banes, all those things can add up to a game that gets pretty crunchy. So I don't know. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
So what's your first impression of Drawsteel? Let us know. thievescantcast@gmail.com and again online at thievescantcast. Next time, we'll be taking a look at the Making a Character section.
Hope to see you for part 2.
And hey, don't forget, we'll see you this Saturday as well for another episode of Thieves Cant. So until then, this has been Thieves Cant Capers, the Draw Steel Job. I'm Jeremy Shea.
And I'm Chris White.
We will see you next time.